Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's TFANA Talk. I'm Mark Blankenship, a theater journalist and a lifelong enthusiast for the work of Thornton Wilder. I've had the pleasure of writing, speaking, and making films about Wilder's plays in venues across the country. And the night before my wedding, which was 8 years ago today, true statement, I even made a speech that invoked the many ways that Wilder's writing has impacted my moral understanding of the world. So that's a little bit about where I'm coming from. And just to let you know, if you experience any technical difficulties during our conversation today, all you have to do is email tickets@tfana.org. That's tickets@tfana.org. Today, we're going to be looking back at Theater for a New Audience's 2017 production of Thornton Wilder's The Skin of Our Teeth, which I am happy to say I was lucky enough to see. This experimental comedy follows a seemingly typical American household, the Arbus family, as they face catastrophe after catastrophe across the entire span of human civilization. At every juncture, ice age, flood, war, famine, it really seems like they cannot survive. But every single time, both the Arbus family and the human race do find a way to endure. You might know that The Skin of Our Teeth debuted in 1942, and it won Thornton Wilder his second Pulitzer Prize for drama. But by 2017, the play had not seen a major revival in New York in almost 20 years. So, with a cast of 35, this was one of the most ambitious productions in TFANA's history and a relevant milestone for the life of the play in New York. It won 2 Obie-Awards, one for director Arin Arbus and one for actor Kecia for her performance as Mrs. Arbus. Before we talk to some of the artists who were involved in bringing this production to the stage, let's take a look back at what it was like to see it on stage.
It's an old play. It's an old chestnut, but what Arin has done is she's blown the dust off it, and not even blown, but she took an atom bomb and blew the dust off, and there is a new life and a new approach to it.
Thornton Wilder was definitely in a place of flux when he wrote this. We were in the midst of war, on our way to war, not sure how the war was going to turn out. And so we are in a very similar place right now. A war of sorts in terms of the ideologies of our country and not knowing where we're going. And for many of us, it's a frightening time.
There's only what I know, and what I don't know, but I don't know. There's only what I know, and what I don't know, that I don't know.
Skin of Our Teeth reminds us, I think, as a play, that we will begin again, we will build again.
Sabina is very much a fatalist and a cynic. She doesn't see much hope, and she panics, and often her instinctual reaction to crisis is to just find the path of least resistance. And she despairs a lot, and I can relate to that.
Mr. Antrobus, what's that? That big white thing? Mr. Antrobus! It's ice! It's ice!
She's an ordinary girl, is how she describes herself, and can't articulate the many intricacies of humanity and the human spirit and why we forge onward.
All right, Sabina, pass the sandwiches.
I thought I was working in a respectable home with respectable guests. I've given my notice, Mr. Antrobus, 2 weeks, that's the law.
She keeps quitting and then she stays because I think it's the only control she feels over her environment and her life. And that makes her feel like she has agency. But actually, she's inextricably tied to this family.
Splendid.
Yeah. You are a fine woman, Maggie, but a man has his own life to lead in the world.
Well, after living with you for 5,000 years, I guess I should have a word to say or two, shouldn't I?
Mrs. Arbus believes that the roles that she plays and how she directs her family is integral to the continuance of civilization. That each thing that we do as a family and as individuals is very important to moving forward. And she represents all the hope that we have in the world.
Maggie, I didn't dare ask. My books, they haven't been lost, have they?
No, there's some right there.
Ah.
Getting tattered.
Yes! Remember, Maggie, we almost lost them before, and when we did finally collect a few torn copies out of the old cellars, they ran through everyone's head like a fever, as good as rebuilt the world.
He is saying there are people who went through what we are going through before, and we need to listen to them. And he says the first thing that people who really want to be present in this world and live and learn need to listen to what the people around them are saying.
I think it's important that people see this show now because we're addressing how humanity marches through moments of terrible distress and crisis. It's a roadmap that makes me feel like we have a reason for moving forward.
Wow. Very striking return to that production. And for me, honestly, a little moving just seeing performers being interviewed in a theater space, something that I know I would like to visit again very soon. That being said, I'm so glad that we were able to see that trailer, and now it is my pleasure to introduce some of the artists who brought that production to life. First, we have Arin Arbus. Arin is the resident director at Theater for a New Audience, where in addition to The Skin of Our Teeth, for which she did win the Obie-Award, she has directed repertory productions of Strindberg's The Father, Ibsen's A Doll's House, and 7 productions of Shakespeare, including The Winter's Tale, King Lear, and Othello. Last season, she directed Terrence McNally's Frankie and Johnny in the Clair de Lune on Broadway with Audra McDonald and Michael Shannon, and it's a pleasure to have her with us today. Hello, Arin.
Hi, everybody.
Next, we have the composer of this production. They wrote a totally original score. It's César Alvarez. César is a composer, lyricist, playwright, and performance maker. And among their 5 full-length musicals is Futurity, which won the 2016 Lucille Lortel Award for Outstanding Musical. César is a recipient of the Jonathan Larson Award and a Princeton Arts Fellowship, and is an assistant professor of sonic arts at Dartmouth College. Hello, César.
Hello.
We are also joined by 2 members of the cast. Kecia Lewis, who won an Obie Award in 2017 for 2 performances she gave that season, both as Mrs. Antrobus and as the gospel legend Sister Rosetta Tharpe in Marie and Rosetta. She is currently celebrating 36 years in the entertainment industry with innumerable appearances on stage and screen, including her Broadway debut at 18 years old in the original company of Dreamgirls. Hello, Kecia.
Hello.
And last but not least, we have Mary Wiseman, who played Sabina, breaker of the fourth wall and back-talking maid to the Antrobus family. Mary is perhaps best known for her role as Sylvia Tilly on the CBS show Star Trek Discovery, and TFANA audiences will definitely remember her not only for her performance as Sabina, but for what the New York Times called her, quote, comically inspired performance in Brandon Jacobs Jenkins' Obie Award-winning play, An Octoroon. Hello, Mary.
Hello.
Great. So now that we're all here, I want to let everyone who is with us today know that we will be having a conversation among ourselves for about 40 minutes, and then we'll be opening up for your questions. So let me explain how that's going to work. At the bottom of your screen, you will find a button marked Q&A. And when you click that, you'll open a chat box into which you can type a question for the panel. You can type a question into the Q&A box at any time during this talk. The panelists and I will not see your questions directly, but there are TFANA staff members who are standing by and seeing everything that you type. And when we do open up for questions, they will select as many of those as possible for us to discuss. Now, if your question is selected, a staff member will reply in the chat box to let you know. And then when it's your time to ask your question, you'll be connected to the conversation using just your audio, not your video, so that you can ask your question yourself. So it's kind of like calling in to talk to Brian Lehrer on WNYC. Again, at any time during the talk, you can use the Q&A button to type your question, and we will do our best to answer as many of your questions as possible. And my computer is giving me moment. I'm going to just vamping. And hi, okay, now let's kick things off. Hello, also, again, thank you all for joining us today. One thing I wanted to start our conversation by discussing was the fact that obviously 3 years have passed since this production happened, and it's been over 70 years since The Skin of Our Teeth premiered, but I would argue, and maybe you'll agree with me, that there is still something that's endlessly relevant about this play. And I wonder for all of you, is there anything about the play or the production itself that has stuck with you since you worked on it? Is there anything that you feel like still feels fresh or present to you about the play or the production or what it was asking you to consider?
I'll say that in light of what's going on in our world right now, this pandemic, which at first, like in every kind of major world happening or transition, you think, oh, it's just, you know, a little something. I don't know about you guys, but I certainly felt like when it happened, it's like, oh, it's kind of a flu thing and it'll pass and everybody is just overdoing it and they need to calm down. And here we are, you know, almost 6 months in, dealing with a disease that feels like it could kill the world. So it's just, you know, Wilder's ability to look at the past and prophetically, if you will, speak about the future that's coming. I mean, it just never ends. It's unbelievable. My mother was born in 1942 when this play was first done, you know. Pearl Harbor hadn't happened yet. So it's all these, you know, crazy incidents that we just keep going through, you know, as a civilization. It's amazing to me.
Well, Kecia, I promise that we didn't plan this in advance, but in my copy of the play that I nerdily have been marking up, I actually marked the part in Act 2 where Sabina says, I don't believe it. I don't believe it's anything at all. I've seen hundreds of storms like this about the approaching catastrophe in Atlantic City. And that's kind of what you just said, I feel like. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish the play would become irrelevant. That would be good for the human race. I first encountered it after 9/11, and I thought, like, oh my God, this is such an amazing and timely piece of writing. Like, I want to direct this, and I better do it soon because it won't be relevant anymore. And obviously, that is not the case. I mean, it's about humanity in crisis, and unfortunately, I mean, like right now, it couldn't be more timely. And I think if we survive 1,000 years, I think probably it will still be a really urgent play.
Yeah, I feel like so much of the energy that we brought into this play was fueled by Trump being sworn into office very early in our rehearsal period. And it's kind of crazy to revisit it at this time at the end of his first and hopefully last term, and to still be in a new moment of crisis that where the world looks potentially even bleaker than it did at that time, which didn't feel possible at the time. You know, I getting to reread this in preparation for this, I forgot what a balm it was at that time when it was upsetting, you know, and Thornton Wilder, like you said, is such a great moralist, and it's so comforting to read his perspective on these things when things feel hopeless.
I feel like there's something about the play which is a fundamentally an act of hope, because he takes catastrophe and he dimensionalizes it through human history, which causes you to just have to say, oh, this is what being human is. This is the whole process of being human, which whenever we're in a cataclysm like this, it's really hard not to feel like Job, woe is me, why is the world ending while I'm here? And I think to me, it was really moving to hear someone describe the world having felt like it was ending over and over and over and over again, from, decades ago, when it's already felt like it had been ending many times since then. And there's something really comforting about that ongoing struggle and feeling and performing a lineage. And then I think really significantly sharing that feeling in a room with people. It was very therapeutic to be with you all and to be together sharing this experience and watching the play multiple times, which I feel like you kind of have to do to understand it. I didn't feel like I understood it till it was closing. And then I remember thinking, oh, this is really starting to make sense to me, which is such an incredible experience of a work of art.
Cesar, can you say a little bit more about what you mean in terms of what you did understand at the end that maybe you didn't understand at the beginning?
Yeah. I think when Arin asked me to work on the play and I read it, I had no idea what was happening. And that's why I wanted to do it. I think generally I like to work on things that are confounding. I had the only thing I can compare it to is when I got the rehearsal draft of Octoroon. Sarah Benson sent me that, and I read it, and I was like, "What the holy hell is happening in this play?" And it was such a good experience to try to spend time unpacking it. That I had the similar experience with Skin of Our Teeth. I just didn't understand it, and then by the end of it, I think the thing that I figured out is that. And I think the play is super problematic in about 100 ways, according to the current understanding of politics. But the fundamental thing was that love of community and family and actually artistic and intellectual practice were the threads for human history. They were just the things that were gonna keep us together. It was like in the trailer, he talks about the books. And the virality of the quest for knowledge and the quest for culture it's essentially like the thing that keeps humans surviving, which as an artist is really hopeful because it makes what we do mean something in a cataclysm. When a lot of times when you're in cataclysm, artists are like, why am I an artist? Why? What do I do? And it's really important for artists to know that this is their time to be building language around what this experience is.
Mm. And Arin, I know that you mentioned that you had encountered the play, I think you said around 9/11, yes? So what did you feel like you learned by the end of producing this or directing this production that maybe you hadn't known about the play in the 20-ish years prior to that?
Well, I mean, a million things.
Can you create a bullet-pointed list of all of them for us right now?
I mean, I think it's a play that wants to be performed. Sometimes I think Wilder gets accused of being sort of bookish, but actually it's like it's totally about being alive and present in the room with an audience. I mean, this play, the way that it breaks down is thrilling. The characters in the play are going through a crisis, and the actors in the production are going through a crisis, and both the play and the stuff inside the play is facing extinction or collapse. So getting it into a theater in front of an audience, I think sort of illuminates it in a completely different way. I mean, I find the unstable tone of the play just incredible and very, very difficult. You need actors like these two folks right here to be able to pivot without transition from broad comedy to existential despair to talking to the dinosaur, to absurdity, and that is something that I couldn't understand without this company. Yeah, and I also felt like I feel this way with Wilder especially, that like the gut punches are mysterious, and they're really hard, like the emotional center is like really hard to locate, and it's not something that you can articulate why it's functioning, and that is illuminated once it's being performed. For me, like there's something so incredibly moving that happened at the end of the play, when Sabina comes out and gives that ordinary girl speech, and you know, and then there are what are they? The hours?
Yes, the philosophers coming.
The philosophers.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's just this sequence that sort of can be like a big gut punch that by reading it you can understand it intellectually, but you can't feel it.
Yeah. Well, and I love too that you mentioned the tone, because it is a play where you can say the world is ending, how devastating, but then like César said, also how hopeful, but then also that was basically some crude flatulence humor that we just got in there. And okay, so I'm wondering for Kecia and Mary, as performers, what did it ask of you, or how did you approach the demand of a play that needed you to play so many different tones in the course of one production?
I think what Arin just spoke about in terms of the pivot,
Mm-hmm.
the longer I'm working as an actor, the more I am discovering for me that acting is becoming more and more like a science. You know, there's no set formula, right? Because for each character that you play, there's, you know, different circumstances and different people and, you know, all of that. And then navigating the actors that you're working with and the director that you have. So all of these things. And so for me, it was kind of the science of it that was very interesting to me and intrigued me a lot. And one of the things that I love about Arin as a director, especially longer than was comfortable, she said, find it. I'm not telling you what it is. I'm not telling you where to go. I'm not telling you where to pull from. You find it. And so the joy of working on it, it was also maddening, but it was very joyful, especially now in retrospect, recognizing that I had the opportunity to be a mad scientist with this woman. You know? And that was really exciting to me. And I was terrified before we started, because good God, the skin of our teeth in 2017 in Brooklyn, really?
Well, and Kecia, I'm interested to hear you talk about the request from Arin that you find it. Is there a moment or a scene that you can remember being like, oh, I remember when I found something in that, and it like that you remember having maybe a breakthrough and actually finding something that you maybe hadn't seen right away?
Yeah, the one that comes to mind, there's a moment where after Mr. Antrobus says that he's leaving her, and she has this speech about, you know, what I found eventually was she was talking about being a woman, and she was talking about her role and how she saw herself, and what the family meant to her. But in the beginning, I looked at those words on the page and I was like, Arin, what is this? What is she talking about? What is she saying? What is this? And Arin just kept directing me to find the truth emotionally. Say the words, find the truth emotionally, and it'll connect. And the dots did connect eventually.
And do you mean the speech where she throws the bottle into the ocean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That one, yeah, it's so interesting. I'm so interested, and I guess it's really exciting to hear you talk about connecting to that specifically through Mrs. Antrobus, because when I read that speech, I always just am sort of overwhelmed by it's about all women. And it's interesting to hear you talk about having to turn that into a specific, grounded moment of a character.
Right, right. I think because, again, Arin kept directing me to find the truth in here. And so I couldn't think of it in terms of all women.
Mm-hmm.
You know, unless I make it specific, you know, you're not going to connect to it if I don't connect to it. So once I realized that and stopped worrying about the huger picture of what Mrs. Antrobus is saying, then I found it.
Right. And Mary, I wonder for you as well, obviously Sabina, an equally complicated character. Mrs. Antrobus and Sabina, I think, are sort of endlessly fascinating. Can you talk about any moment that you had playing Sabina where you thought, oh, okay, I've unlocked something here. This scene or this moment makes more sense to me than maybe it did at the beginning?
I don't know. Like, this was like, Sabina is like the hardest role I've ever had to play. It's crazy. The alacrity with which you have to play it and how on top of it you need to be to turn those corners and break that fourth wall. And it's like, and it's timing, you know, it's like comic timing. You can't take your time sometimes. You have to be able to just,
right.
And that was physical and it was hard. And I remember in the rehearsal room, it didn't get funny for a really long time. And it was pretty scary because nobody was laughing. And I don't think we really found I don't think I figured out how to get the laughs until we got into
tech.
The space. Yeah, exactly. And I even like rereading it for this, you know, I have that like dysphoric feeling of being like, God damn it. Like, why didn't I think of this then? It really is just like a bottomless play. And it, you know, like speaking to what César was talking about a couple moments ago, there's a lot about it that is dated in a way that makes it difficult to enter. Gender is very binary. Whiteness is the standard. All the gender, there's a lot of stuff about like archetypal gender roles that is just like hard to come up against. And I would say like throughout the play that was a challenge because we couldn't rewrite it. I mean, I ad-lib a fair amount, but you can't ad-lib that stuff out of it. And then you have these moments like the moment you just mentioned where Kecia gave that beautiful speech about throwing the bottle in the ocean. And I got to sit on stage and listen to that every night. And I was moved to tears every night because what she said in that speech completely contradicts all that super set in stone gender stuff. What she says basically is, I'm a human, you know, like see that at the end, like it's just a beautiful moment of Mrs. Antrobus bearing her soul and saying, I am not what you think I am. I'm not what you read about. I'm not who you see in movies. I am a unique and distinct and one time only human soul that's like here and ready to love and ready to give back. And it's like, how could the same person who wrote this part of the play write that part of the play? And that's where that like confounded feeling of mystery comes up where you're like, wow, this is really worth digging into because I have more questions than I have answers every time I do it.
Right.
So, you know, it was profound. It was like a really cool teaching experience. Do I feel like I mastered it or like I'll ever understand this play thoroughly? No, but I think this play will always give me good questions.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and Mary, I like too how you talk about the fact that for a contemporary audience, there are definitely some things about this play that are like, oof. And then it's interesting because you as Sabina were in the role where you were asked to directly communicate with a contemporary audience. Like Sabina breaks the fourth wall over and over and over again. So can you talk a little bit about how you approached your conversations with the crowd during this performance?
Well, I mean, it got a lot easier once there was a crowd. I have to say. Like that really lifted off into space once I had people to talk to. And I think one of the things that was difficult about it is you're supposed to be, the kind of breaks we set a certain standard of like the bigness or broadness of the comedy or the character within the confines of the play we're performing. and then you break out of that, but I'm still working with language from 1942.
Right.
So it doesn't have that snap of naturalism that we could have really benefited from. That's like, okay, this is actually Mary, as opposed to like, what was her name, like Miss Fairview or something?
Yeah.
Whoever the
Lily.
actor,
Somerset, I think.
Oh.
Miss Somerset.
That's right.
So that was challenging, but Arin and the Wilder estate were like pretty generous when it came to like finding little places where we had license to make it feel like it was immediate or happening in the moment. And then, yeah, once we got people in there, once we had like, we did the shows for kids that came in the morning, and you had all this childish energy and excitement and all that stuff. It really, I feel like the play started to take off in this different way, where it was like, oh, this is all about the relationship to the audience, because Sabina is an ordinary girl, you know, like that's so important. Like she's not interested in her higher self. She's not, you know, she wants to survive, and she wants, and she needs, and she's a desire. And that's her point of connection with the audience, you know. Then so once I kind of got more of that under my belt, I felt like that stuff really like clarified for me.
Totally. And as we transition into the next question, we'll also just put up slide 8 from the production photo so everyone can get a look at Mary. There's, well, oh, wait, I think I may have asked for the wrong slide, but that is Mary back there.
Sorry.
That's not the one I thought it was going to be, but that is still Mary running off over a rooftop. I think there was a slide in there somewhere of just Mary, but it doesn't matter. We'll get back to that. Now, Arin, I'm interested for you, obviously directing this play in 2017. How did you, oh, there she is. Yes, in that excellent costume.
Amazing, so beautiful.
Arin, how did you approach the conversation between the play of 1942 and the culture of 2017 into which it was being produced?
Yeah, I mean, one of the great pleasures of the play, I think, is are the anachronisms in it, and it felt so, you know, as I said earlier, it felt so urgent at the moment that we were doing it, and it took me a long time to sort of figure out this is really a dorky director problem, but to figure out like when each act is set, and like where the anachronisms are and how they're expressed, and like the place that you hit that you run into that question, you really have to deal with it, is when you're designing the clothes, in addition to other things, but there is a stage direction in there that was really illuminating to me, which was about the refugees. That Wilder says something like, you know, in come the refugees, and they're dressed like people off of the streets of New York. And that was kind of, that like kind of cracked the play open for me in a certain way, because we, you know, as you could see from that costume that Mary was in, some of the play was set in this sort of very heightened theatrical world. And then with the refugees, those were people in street clothes from 2017. And that collision between you know, the dinosaur and the mammoth and the family who were dressed in sort of very costumed, and then the ordinariness of the rest of the company, like in that first act, for example, was exciting for me. You know, and that tension there, I mean, I don't know, it's hard, but it is what is super interesting about doing the play now. Even the problematic aspects of it there's this create a kind of tension.
And because you've referenced my beloved Dino and Mammoth, I think this would be a great time to look at slide number 1, which shows how they were realized in this production. Now, Cesar, looking at this photo reminds me, of course, that there are many fantastical elements to what happens in The Skin of Our Teeth. And I wonder for you, can you talk about the musical world that you wanted to create that could contain this play, and like what you wanted your music to accomplish in the production?
When I read the play, I think I was just like, obviously the dinosaur and the mammoth are the musicians. I thought that, I almost felt like it was just in the script, but maybe, I don't think it was. It was so obvious to me. It was so obvious. I couldn't imagine a production of this where they weren't playing instruments.
I mean, if you're going to have a mammoth, you may as well give the mammoth an instrument.
I mean, well, and I'm a child of the 80s, and I went to Showbiz Pizza a lot, which was a runner to Chuck E. Cheese. And in the Showbiz Pizza, they had the rain curtain, the glittering rain curtain, which then came back, and you had these terrifying animatronic beasts playing instruments, which probably was my first experience of musical theater. And I was so scared of this experience, and yet it's basically what all my musicals reference. And with this piece, I was like, wait, we can actually do this. We can have the instruments and the beasts and the rain curtain. Arin, can we do it? And Arin was really excited about the idea. I think for me, the thing that really works about this play is that Thornton Wilder takes such a leap of faith towards abstraction. The play is this experiment where he's like, I think if I take all of these very strong, very bizarre, anachronistic ideas and jam them together in an assemblage, in a kind of violence, that violence and that assemblage is going to tell the story of the violence and the assemblage of survival that human beings have been doing. And it's going to be incredibly dissonant and incredibly absurd and incredibly difficult, but that's the point. Which is such, to me, like a leap of faith as a playwright, to say, I'm going to basically make a play that's unactable and impossible to produce and makes no sense, because that's what the play's trying to say. Which, you know, and he was so influenced by Joyce and this time, but it's so brave. The play is so brave, and I think the music had to kind of just honor that. The music is the language of abstraction for me, and I think the music had to support the courage of the play and the humor of the play and it had to sort of install a heart in, and I think it's very similar to Brecht. I think Brecht does a similar kind of brave thing of jamming things together to kind of create this feeling of uncertainty and difficulty. And the music has to give you the feeling, because if you turn it into a sort of theoretical exercise, you just die, you just miserable. And so I always feel like theater should, even difficult, complicated theater should sound like some feeling, you know, and you should have some kind of emotional juice. And so I was really excited. The music is actually pretty peppy and kind of like sweet, which I think cuts against a lot of the cataclysm of the play. So yeah, maybe if I did it again, I would make it a little more cranky, but
But what you're saying also really strikes me. I remember so clearly being excited or moved that I could see the music getting played on stage, that, like you said, that the instruments were visible to me. And it's occurring to me that probably did affect my emotional experience of the show, that if the musicians had been subsumed in the pit or something, I might have had a different relationship to what the music was doing in the show. I don't know.
We need
if
to do
they're-
another webinar on musicians subsumed in the pit. That's a different webinar that I would love to do with you.
Okay, great. How is next Friday at 4? Great, I'll pencil that in. I just want to remind everyone who's listening, if you have any questions for our panel, feel free to drop them into our Q&A, which you can find at the lower part of your screen. Just click on the Q&A, and in about 10 minutes, we'll be able to start taking those questions. Kecia, as we saw in that video at the top of this conversation, you were someone who had a number, like you sang in the show, obviously. And I wonder, can you talk about how singing as part of your performance impacted your performance or your relationship to your role or to the show?
I'm sure that Arin is giggling because if she I think she remembers, I was so not wanting to sing. I had just come off of this like major, that Rosetta show was like, I was skrelting and my voice was bleeding 8 shows a week. And I was like, a play. And then it was like, you're going to be singing. I was like, what? You know, yeah, that I have to admit, I had some feelings around that, but it served the play and it served the purpose. And one of the things that how Arin sold me on doing the show, because we had lots of conversations about that, was she had this beautiful idea. She said, do you know of any Black women who've ever played Mrs. Antrobus? And I went, no, I don't think I do. And she said, what do you think about the idea of the origin of civilization being this Black woman and what that could represent in this piece without it ever being said? So that heightened it for me in another way, which translated into the singing. It was like, yeah, that I could get into. That takes it to another place for me. And I loved it, you know. When we got about halfway through, I was like, oh, this makes sense. I'm down. The 10 a.m. matinees are not for singers. However, you get over it, right? You just do it. So
Kecia got to sing the roof off of the set.
yeah.
Do you mean that literally?
Yeah.
The
Like
roof of the house, yeah.
she blew the roof of the house up off of the set with her voice.
Now, Arin, did you know going in that there would be so much music woven into your production?
Yeah, I mean, César and I, he did a lot of work before we started, and we came in with what we ended up performing. To me, the music was such a amazing part of the production, and actually the way that the music and it was, César, you say that the music was very peppy, which some of it was, and sweet, but there was also this incredible, I mean, you should describe this, but the final song was, there were 35 people in the company, and they sang this incredible choral. How would you describe that?
Yeah, it was like a chorale. We wanted to create a sort of kind of complex tapestry of voices at the end. I think we're really cognizant of the way that the refugees and the ensemble were used as props in the play a little bit, and we wanted to give voice to them in a way that felt meaningful, and particularly in that moment there was, and there continues to be, like a huge refugee crisis. It was one of the big things on the news at that time, and it felt like it couldn't just be a kind of prop. And I think we really wanted the end moment to kind of weave everyone together in a really dissonant way almost, but also simultaneously kind of give the feeling of togetherness.
As somebody who sang in choir for 8 years of my life, I find there's something so incredibly moving about voices aligned in song. And we used that song in the final act when Sabina is, or when we actually had the whole company put the house back together. And to me, it was something about civilization and a theatrical company. And it was harmonious and dissonant in this really beautiful way.
And I love that we're talking about the end of the play, and obviously Sabina does have a large role to play there because she literally just starts the whole process over again. Mary, for you, can you talk about that last scene? Like, what was that like for you to be in that scene and to be responsible for basically starting the engine of the play over again?
I remember, like, I would struggle because I was like pretty overcome with emotion after that song. It was a really powerful thing to be a part of. I am not a singer, but I love to sing. Like, love to hear people sing, and especially being surrounded by like good singers. I mean, it was just so moving, and that company was a really special one. There was a lot of love in that company, and I don't know, it was just, I remember feeling like, I feel like, Arin, we talked about this. I was like, I'm not sure the emotion I'm experiencing is appropriate to this moment, because I was like, sometimes like barely getting through the words. But I think that there is something about how you realize that the play will never end, that it'll go on forever, that feels like purgatory. And there's something about it that also feels very hopeful. And when I feel those two feelings in tandem, I cry, and so it was a great release to say, like, it's not solved yet, we haven't figured it out yet, but we're gonna do it again, and try again, which is also the experience of encountering the play. Is you're like, one read, I'm not gonna get 4% of this. It's gonna take, I'm gonna have to come back to this play a couple times at different points in my life to really understand it, or to get closer to understanding it. So it was I felt like it was a huge gift to end the play. And whereas starting the play was incredibly hard. That speech, and then you're just naked out there, setting a tone for a very tonally strange play. As everything's falling apart, trying to find humor while establishing a vocabulary so that the audience feels comfortable was really, really hard. And by contrast, the end of the play was so simple, because you earned all of this stuff, and then you just let it out. So I loved the end of that play. It was one of those plays that leaves you with this elevated feeling after it, like you're touching something a bit beyond the everyday.
It felt like we were saving the human race.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah. The image too that felt so important to me was the loop of it. So you have all this cataclysm after cataclysm after cataclysm, and then we sang the house back together, and then you're just back in the house. You're back in the Antrobus's house, and that loop was exhausting, and intentionally, because you're just like, wow, we are still doing this. We're back in the forever, and the set was so elegant, the way that it choreographed the feeling of that moment. Watching that house fall apart and come back together every night, I could just watch that always. It was so elegant, and we finally got it, so it kind of did it right on this music, and we were just, it was so beautiful. I want to see the video.
But as an actor, it was maddening getting this.
maddening. I remember being so angry. I was like, when will it end? When will we get it? Ah! It was awful.
Yeah.
But then once
amazing
we
play.
got it, oh my God, I remember going in the dressing room and being like, this is never gonna work.
Yeah. I remember that too.
You were so patient. So patient. But it was like, oh my God.
Well,
Never worked on anything like that before.
the way that you all were just talking about the ending of the play also just really makes me think about the fact that I do find it so overwhelming and moving to think that little house contained the universe, essentially, structurally in that play. Like everything explodes out of the house and then the house reassembles. And it just reminds me that one of the things that has always said to me is that we also contain the universe. Like our moment contains all moments. Our bodies contain all bodies. If we think about it that way, if we allow ourselves to see that we're part of the great endless river of history. And describing the final moment of that play, at least for me, really underlines how this production can say that too. I mean, that's just my interpretation, but thanks for letting me think that.
I just wanted to say one thing. I think we've mentioned like the political questions of this play. I think the thing that I'm thinking about is the way, I think the play does offer some critiques of kind of like white cis hetero patriarchy in the ways that it draws and animates some of the female characters. But I do find that the play is limited in that it's almost like, and somebody correct me if they think I'm off, but it's almost like Thornton Wilder knew that there was a problem with patriarchy and it was part of this problem, but he couldn't actually imagine his way out of it. Like he couldn't actually put any kind of proposal in the play that was alternative to that. And then in the end, we end up back in the house with the maid, right? And it's like, I'm not a Wilder scholar. I'm just thinking about the feeling of seeing that play now. For me, when I go to see theater, I'm always interested in like somebody imagining something. They're helping me imagine our way out of this fucking mess. And in any way, in any angle, in any dimension. And so I do think it's interesting to think about this play now in terms of what it does imagine and what it does offer in terms of hope and possibility, and also where it still sort of feels stuck in the 1940s and 50s. But I don't know. It's just something I'm thinking about.
I mean, there are moments that are painful. Mr. Antrobus invents a wheel and the number 100 in the alphabet, and Mrs. Antrobus invents an apron. It's just like, that stuff hurts. It's like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I feel like Kecia could speak to this too, but like playing these characters that are archetypal, it's like you do kind of chafe under all that stuff. And
you do, just like the women who lived in it.
Right.
Just like them. And then we have suffragists, and then we have Fannie Lou Hamers, and we have Shirley Chisholms, and we push and we push and we push and we push,
Yeah.
And I'm sure the women that come behind us, if civilization continues to go on, they'll look at us and go, oh my God, all that they had to deal with as women. You know what I mean? I mean, truly, because we evolve, we really do. So.
So we are now going to transition into a couple of questions from some of the people who have joined us today. First, coming to the microphone is Bill. Bill, can you come on mic and ask your question to the panel?
Hi, you guys.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you, Mark.
Hi,
Arin,
Bill.
César. Hi, you all. Kecia, Harry, thank you so much for this. This has been an amazing discussion. Thank you. It's incredible. My question is, in every period of time, whenever there's a cataclysmic event, it always seems worse than everything that preceded it. All the other ones were bad, yeah, but now it's really bad. This play seems to sort of invoke that question. So my question would be, you know, here we are we have not only the pandemic, but after we get through dealing with the pandemic, then we have the real problem, climate change. And then, you know, the world seems to be drifting towards authoritarianism. Would Wilder be as, would you guess that Wilder would be as optimistic now as he was when he wrote the play? Would he find that would he be inclined to believe that the humanity is going to make it through again by the skin of its teeth? Thanks. I'll take my answer off the air.
You guys, I just want to say that was Bill who played our stage manager in the production. I just would like that to be known.
I think that he would. You know, I too am like Cesar. I am not a Thornton Wilder scholar, but I do remember, I think I remember in researching him a little bit that he wrote this after Our Town.
He did, yes.
And some kind of, you know, people feeling like Our Town was just too depressing, or people feeling depressed after walking out of Our Town. So, you know, he was able to find a way to say the hard stuff in a way that while we were laughing with our mouth open, he could slip the truth in. You know, I can't imagine that he would do anything different looking at what we're looking at right now. You know, that seemed to be who he was as a writer.
I don't think anything about this play makes room for nihilism. I just think it's so deeply invested in humanity, and in a moment, I mean, at the beginning, you know, he had endured World War I, which was no skip in the park, and then here World War II was dawning, and I don't think he had any illusions about, based on what the play, it doesn't seem like he had any illusions about how dire the situations were and the stakes were. And I don't think I really feel like the piece is this demand for imagination around what it means to be human and what it means to survive. And it really, it kind of aggressively asks us to consider that. And I think we should do that. I aggressively also want to ask us to consider what we need to be doing to survive and to be bringing more freedom into this world for more people, and to continue, or like Donna Haraway would say, like staying with the trouble, staying in this mess, because there's so much to be won or had. So.
And if I may just interject as a Wilder nerd, in his novel, The Bridge of San Luis Rey, he imagines the cataclysmic death of 5 people of a variety of different ethnicities, social classes, and genders, and then demonstrates how, even though their lives evaporated in an instant, the echo of their lives carried on for centuries. And I think that I've always found that he can look a cataclysm in the face and see it for what it is, but then also extrapolate something meaningful that can still come out of it and push us all forward.
There's also that moment towards the end of the play that I love so much and feels so right to me, particularly now having lived like through quarantine, where when Mr. Antrobus comes home from war, first of all, Sabina like says like, I miss the war. Everybody was so good. You know, everybody helped each other because it was so bad. And I see that all the time, like racial uprisings that are happening in the States. It's like, would this happen if like half of us didn't have a job to go to? You know, it's like when there's room for it, when you're in it, all these things feel very urgent and everyone's able to sort of like take active measures. But then once you fall back into the flow of peacetime, a lot of that stuff falls away and you just go back into this sort of numb comfort and trying to stay with that there's something in the cataclysm that is awakening, that makes you feel alive and activated, and then there's something within the comfort that is deeply like deadening and steals a little bit of your like moral identity. That feels like so relevant to me right now as we're like imagine what our future is going to be after this moment, after the pandemic, like how we're going to hold on to these ideas, all these sharp critiques of capitalism and all that stuff.
The line in the play is something like, in wartime, people want what's best, and in peacetime, they want what's comfortable. Something like that, yeah. Well, I do want to go, we have our next question now is coming from Allie. Allie, if you want to come on the mic, we'd love to hear from you.
And yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. So I think that a lot of my question was kind of answered in the just took place over the last 5 minutes, especially Zara's comments about, you know, looking like aggressively looking these kinds of situations in the face and dealing with them. Because, so my question was basically to ask you to comment on Wilder's darkness, because I didn't feel hopeful watching this play. I love him. I love this play. You know, I think, as Mary said, it's bottomless. The first time I saw it, I was like, what is happening? You know, so I had to go back. And I think that's the best kind of play, the one that just washes over you. You know, there's no real verbal or intellectual understanding. You have to go back and you have to keep watching. And I would have gone every night if I could have. I thought it was such a fantastic production. I just loved it. But for me, it gave me more a language to like explain why I felt so crazy and why the world was so crazy. So it wasn't hopeful as much as like, oh, okay, that this on the stage makes more sense to me actually than anything else that I'm seeing often. But you know how our town has, it can be depressing, as Kecia said, but it also, you know, it's been produced by high schools for years. This like nice little play that, you know, tells us we need to treasure our moments, right? And there's so much more to that play, obviously, than that. And with this one too, so there's been all this conversation that's been really helpful about, you know, Wilder's perception of how we survive and have to survive. But can you talk about his dark side a little bit? You know, I mean, I feel like it's there, and this makes me think a little bit of Thomas Hardy. That's where I'm nerdy, because I'm a Thomas Hardy scholar fan.
Right.
Hardy is often accused of being pessimistic. I feel like there's an alignment here, because to me he's just realistic, not pessimistic. But there's this itty bitty bit of hope, you know, that like it's there. It's just. Do you see, you know, an alignment between those two? Or even like the one leaf on the tree at the end of Waiting for Godot, you know, things are really scary, but I don't know how articulate that question was, but.
No, I think it makes sense though, just the idea of, can we talk a little bit about the way that Wilder confronts and interweaves darkness into the stories that he's telling?
Yeah, I mean, I think the darkness in the play is never extinguished, and it's there in the, you know, it's there in the dinosaurs who are delightful, but that is, you know, we are looking at extinction when we look at them. And certainly, you know, Henry survives too. And that is really, I think, important. As Cesar was saying, I think he had no illusions about our troubles, the troubles within us and within our society. And you know, something that's just sort of dramaturgically, something that I find super interesting about it is like, you know, asking the question, like, do these archetypical characters, like, you know, in traditional dramatic structure, there's a big arc and a big transformation, and it's harder actually to locate that in these characters. I think there is something there that exists, but those are the things of darkness that I think are some of the things that are woven through the play and are essential to it, as kind of essential to its hope also.
I wanted to say, I was on the other side of a webinar recently where the activist Esther Arma was talking, who I encourage you all to look up her work on emotional justice. She said something that has stuck with me, which is, it's the job of the artists to language this moment. And to me, when she said that, I was like, I was like, no wonder I haven't been able to do anything I'm trying to process this moment. I haven't been able to make any work since the pandemic, basically. I've tried, but it's failed. And I think a lot of artists have had that experience, and that's because we're processing right now and trying to figure out how to language. And what's so hopeful to me about this play isn't the content, it's the act that the vulnerability of him trying to language his moment so courageously and sort of non-linearly, because it was the most effective way he could think and talk and communicate about what he was experiencing. And that act of being willing to just actually put your complexity onto the page and into the stage, that's the optimism to me. It's not that the play is necessarily going to make you feel good. It's that the play is going to remind you that someone was brave enough to write that play. And like, that to me is what is the call to arms for all of us, to use whatever tools we have to figure out how to language this moment and to transform this moment into something that will let us live another day. So, and let our planet live another day, and let one another and take care of one another a little better than we've been doing.
So our next question comes from Michael in Manhattan. Michael, if you want to come on mic, we'd love to hear from you.
Hello?
Hello, yes.
Hi, how are you? Thank you all for being here. It's really great to hear all your feeling about this play that I love. I've always thought of Skin of Our Teeth as Our Town on acid. I always thought it was like, and I started to think about the combination of the stage manager in Our Town is the only character who really talks to the audience, and in Skin of Our Teeth, Sabina is really the only character, I think, who actually breaks the fourth wall. As a director and as an actress, did you see the similarities there at all?
Yeah.
And in terms of the relationship between the stage manager in Our Town and Sabina in Skin of Our Teeth? Yeah.
But I mean, they're very similar in the direct address aspect. I will just say that there are other moments that people talk to the audience, specifically in a big way in the third act when everybody gets sick from eating moldy pie. And Bill Ewens, who was just a second ago, as I was reading that again, I could just hear his voice. A really fun part of the play when everything goes to shit. But it's funny because that's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of where the similarities, and I also did a production of Our Town, funny enough. My husband played the stage manager and I played Emily. And that character is so much more of like your typical sort of omnipotent, godlike figure guiding you through the play. He has very little character actually, except in that he is kind of philosopher, sort of stand-in for Wilder. And Sabina is such a seemingly small, petty little animal. And so I think one of the things that makes this play so fun is that quality of hers, that she's a super unreliable narrator. She's very selfish. She's petty. She hates what she's doing. I mean, going back to the darkness, she's trapped in this nightmare loop that she can't get out of. She's in hell. She thinks this place sucks. And so that's one of the things that like gives this play such a more chaotic feeling, whereas I know that Our Town is often oversimplified and there's a lot of high school productions because you don't have to pay for a set, but there's also something steady and dreamlike and soothing about the pace of Our Town. I mean, she dies at the end, but she enters a sort of meditative nirvana at the end of the play, and then we pull out from there as the play ends in Our Town. And the end of the play is, we are going to enter another loop of this anguish, you know, and we're gonna fight like little animals. So they're an interesting counterpoint because in their similarities they show how different the pieces are.
That's really on point. Like I've never thought about that.
Should
before,
I go?
Yeah. I would actually just say, can you pick up and then hurl a microphone to the ground at this time?
Drop it, girl.
You know, Kecia, this actually, I want to, as a follow-up to that question, I'm so interested by the relationship that Mrs. Antrobus and Sabina have to one another. So when you think about Sabina and Mrs. Antrobus, how do you see those two characters interacting?
I can only think of it in relation like to how I think of it, not as Mrs. Antrobus would think of it.
Right, right.
But as Kecia, I just think that these two types of women, it's time immemorial. It's the one who's holding it together and it's the one who's falling apart. They need each other.
Right.
They depend on each other, whether they'll admit it or not. And we see this over and over and over, decade after decade, different cultural mores as they come and go, but you just see it. And I think that Mr. Antrobus, like time immemorial, is stuck between the two. I like this, and I gotta have it, and I like that, and I gotta have it, you know? So it's a constant push-pull, you know?
Yeah, totally.
And I loved, as an actor, playing this with Mary because she's insane. And we got to share a dressing room together, which was so lovely to get to know her as a person and then find these other kind of layers that we could add into between Sabina and Mrs. Antrobus. So it was beautiful.
Oh.
So much of what was nice about doing this play was that the relationship between Mrs. Antrobus and Sabina became really important because my relationship with Kecia became very important. And so I think that made me very interested, and also made me enter the play in a different way. And I mean, we talked about this in rehearsals, but there's that moment at the end of the second act where they're getting on the ark, basically as the flood is coming in, and Sabina is basically begging for her life, you know, save me. And Mr. Antrobus, he's, you know, kind of has this loftier role of having to herd all the animals under the ark, and the person who saves her is Mrs. Antrobus. And so I think through that choice, and that's the person who hears her, Mrs. Antrobus saves Henry by calling out his true name, Cain, and she pulls him onto the ark, even though he's whatever evil incarnate, and she saves Sabina.
Yeah.
Because she holds it all together, and you don't get to pick and choose who humanity spits out, you know?
Yeah.
Everybody's valuable.
Yeah.
Everybody's valuable. And I love that about the play, you know? I love that about the play. I love that we were able to find that, you know, as actors working together, as well as, you know, what the play had to say about it. And we just, I loved it.
Y'all, so good.
Sorry. I just do think that Thornton Wilder had a kind of non-carceral idea about morality and justice. Like the fact that Cain stays in the play, there's something about, and the fact that he stays in the family, there's something about that gesture that is quite futuristic in terms of thinking about justice and yeah, bringing everyone onto the boat of humanity, even the ones who can't figure out how to play by the rules. There's something deeply humanistic about that is pretty wild.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So it's so true. And then we have one more question now from Shoshana. So Shoshana, if you want to come on mic, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Hi, I'm Shoshana. Also,
oh wait, Shoshana Greenberg that I know.
Yes, part of the Thornton Wilder Society. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So I was very interested in what you were saying about Mrs. Antrobus's speech and like contrasting that with the politics and archetypes of the rest of the play, which you sort of started talking about again before the Q&A started. But I was wondering if there are, you know, I love that moment, and I was wondering if there are other areas in the play that you see these, like, I don't know what to call them, but like these moments of like inner humanity where that come out of the characters, or that, you know, contrast with the politics and archetypes that are so kind of hard to take at, you know, you know, what do you think the contrast that they create contributes to what the play and Wilder is trying to say overall? Because I you know, when I read and see the play as well, it's always like a back and forth between like, oh, what, like, these are so old, you know, old archetypes, but like, what is he really saying about them through these moments where it kind of breaks.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding you, it's the idea of, are there other moments in the play, along with the moment that we've discussed with Mrs. Antrobus, where something about the archetype gets troubled or shaken up or challenged a little bit?
Yeah, and kind of what is that? What do we think that's kind of bringing to the play, or what Wilder is might be saying with that?
Yeah.
One moment that stuck out to me rereading, and I remember being one of those like interesting stuck points in the play for me, is in the third act when Henry and Mr. Antrobus go to have a fight, and Sabina stops it and says, listen, you lost control last time and you almost strangled him to death. We can't do the scene tonight. It's not safe. And then it's a really weird interchange where Henry, the actor playing Henry, says, look, I had this really abusive experience with my father. Something about you triggers me, basically, and I kind of lose it because all that stuff comes back. And then Sabina, the woman playing Sabina, offers this counterpoint, which is like, I've known you for a long time, and that's not true. What you're saying your dad did to you never happened. And it's like, it's this really weird moment of, what is evil? What makes us do bad things? How does trauma contribute to that? Does it matter what happened, or does it matter what made us feel, how it made us feel? Is trauma an excuse for causing trauma in others? You know, like hurt people kind of stuff. And like, I think that's just one of those moments where it's so confusing to me what he's trying to say, and it offers more questions than answers, that like, I would like to reread it again to try to gain some clarity on what he was trying to drive at that moment, because it's not what you expect from someone writing at this time, and it leaves me unsettled every time I read it.
Yeah. Arin, what did you discover about that moment as you inevitably had to dig into it?
Yeah, I mean, like, who do you believe? You know, and I guess I believe, I mean, I think Wilder puts it in there to make it a mystery, that to sort of say, it's so complicated, but to say something about like, yeah, there are things that happen to people that cause them to do things that are incomprehensible, let's say, and also these things are incomprehensible, and you cannot explain them away. You can't explain them with a story about there's no way to understand why Henry is the way he is, or what, you know, what evil is, for lack of a better word. I mean, that's the word Wilder uses. That seems like the contradiction of it is what is tasty about it.
Yeah. So we have one last question from Tappan Wilder, nephew of Thornton Wilder. So Tappan, hi.
Hi.
Hi, Tappan.
Now, you know, I've listened to a lot of these. This is absolutely the best discussion, an absolutely wonderful discussion.
Oh, thank you very much.
I can't thank you. I've actually learned something. I learned a lot. So thank you. You know, my question was just, you know, you've answered it in part as of whether how many of you had acted in another Wilder play, or you claim not to be Wilder scholars. That's okay not to be a Wilder scholar. Believe me, that's a great plus in some ways. Don't worry about that. But I just wondered how familiar you were with his drama before you got into the play.
For me, this is Kecia. I just learned about him in school because, unfortunately, one of the selling points that Arin said to me was, how often do you see an African-American woman in a lead role in a Wilder play? So prayerfully, this will be different. so that the young kids that come behind me in acting school will not just read it and study it in school, but will actually get a chance to be on a stage and do it.
Yeah.
I'm a sort of permanent theater outsider, and I came up in music, and I was completely ignorant about Thornton Wilder. When we were in rehearsal, I read Our Town to great delight. And now I'm moving up to New Hampshire area, so I'm gonna live it. But this was my full introduction to him, and I've treasured him since.
Oh, go ahead, Mary.
No, please, sorry.
I have never been in a Wilder play, but my mother is a major lover of Wilder, and she directed a production of Our Town that I saw maybe when I was in college, at a little theater company in Los Angeles, and like it made all. There were like people, grown men, like sobbing in it. It was really a thrilling experience for me, and so that I guess I first encountered Wilder through my mom.
Yeah, I had more experience with Our Town, and I got to play Emily in Our Town when I was at Juilliard, and it was like truly like the gift of my life that I got to play that role. That play is so powerful, and yeah, the way that it elicits emotion in an audience and in its readers is unlike any other piece of theater that exists. It's just, it touches something, and what it touches is exactly what Emily describes in that final act of coming back to life after having lost it, which is this like incredible intensity and surge and density of emotion and feeling. And so like, I always thought that was one of like the great gifts of my life, to get to like occupy that world. And he speaks to me, and then to get to do Skin of Our Teeth and get to play this part, which is tonally and texturally so different, was like, was beyond. And just getting to talk about it all the time with all of you guys is like, it's so, I feel like so like tingly right now, getting to like go back into it and pull it apart. It's so nutrient dense. It's writing.
For better or for worse, I should say that the first moment I was really moved by Thornton Wilder was in an episode of the show My So-Called Life, when Rayanne Graff performs Emily's final monologue, and Ricky Vasquez and Angela watch on and cry. It really actually became very important to me, that episode. So kind of like showbiz, I guess, Cesar, in your. Anyway, well, thank you all so much. Thank you to everyone who joined us today and listened in and asked wonderful questions. And thank you also to our panelists for your exceptional insights. And we also do want to say a special thank you to the members, donors, and board members of TFANA for joining us today. This whole conversation has been such a treat. And I really like Tappan was saying, I feel like it's just been thrilling to hear the things that you all have been saying about the show. It's just been great. And again, thank you also to the audience for your insightful questions and your compassionate listening. So it was such a pleasure to have you, and thank you all again.
Thank you, Mark.
So great, thank you.